Before I begin the most hated and debatable video that I'll ever do on my channel, which is the prediction of Group A, B, and C in this MLSisback tournament, I just want to quickly clarify that in these upcoming days, if MLS decided to make an announcement of either delaying this tournament because of the skyrocketing cases of the coronavirus in Florida, or the fact that they decided to move to another city for this tournament, or the worst case scenario, they decided to pull the plug for this tournament, this video will be completely irrelevant, and I might think about deleting this video alongside with all the other video that is related to the MLSisback tournament, because again, I am aware of the situation down in Florida, and I know it has started to become the new epicenter for this pandemic. And not to mention, we have heard a lot of news of players getting tested positive for COVID-19. There's more news of a couple of players that got tested positive, and we also heard one cases where it looked like there were 6 players that was tested positive for this team, and that there is a huge concern of whether or not if they're actually going to be participating in this tournament or they're actually going to be withdrawing this tournament. But with that being said, let us actually begin in terms of this prediction video. And this, of course, is part 1 where I look at Group A, B, and C. Part 2, of course, would be on Monday, unless if MLS decided to say that they're not going to do this tournament anymore. Then at that point, there will be no part 2. And again, this video will just be completely irrelevant. So we start off with Group A, which is the group that has the most team out of the rest of the group, and the group that have 3 teams that is automatically going to be moving on into the next round. And I also call this group the group a wild card, and probably, you know, in some way you can say this is the group of shit show, because none of these teams in the first 2 games have actually won a game, and that I think something's going to have to give in terms of somebody eventually going to get their first win in the first match day when all of these teams play together. And we know that this is a group where there is pretty much 5 new head coaches in this, and the only head coach that is not coming into this season that is new is Jim Curtin from the Philadelphia Union. And speaking of which, that is exactly why I'm going to put them at number 1. I'm going to put the Union at number 1 as the team that's going to finish top. And, you know, again, knowing the fact that the Union are the only teams that doesn't really have to deal with this process of trying to find their identity in terms of having a new head coach, that's going to give them a huge advantage, because the Union already know what they are going to do, and the players already know what Jim Curtin wants them to do, so that could be a bit of a bonus. Other bonus, obviously, is the fact that I think this is one of the strongest squad in this team. It's a mix of youngsters and some very talented player. I really like the attack with the likes of Shabilko and Santos there. And let's also not forget to mention Aronson in that midfield, one of the most talented prospect in the MLS, and that I think he's going to have a breakout tournament doing this MLSisback tournament. So yeah, I really think the Union could potentially beat the team to beat in Group A, and that I think they're going to finish at the top of Group A. Now, in second place, I am going to say NYCFC. And of course, NYCFC, I think if you look at all the teams in terms of the squad quality, I think NYCFC has the best squad quality, consider they certainly are the most balanced team, and the team that definitely is too deep in every position. And especially knowing the fact that we are in this tournament where, you know, doing this tournament, I know for a fact that we are going to have certain cases where teams, unfortunately, will lose players because of either they got injured or they, of course, got caught with the coronavirus and got tested positive for that. And that you definitely need some depth in terms of actually doing well in this tournament. And let's also not to mention the fact that this tournament is very fast-paced, and that each of these teams are literally playing a game every single 3 days. So fatigueness is going to be a big factor, and this is also the reason why you definitely need some depth into it. This tournament, and NYCFC probably have some of the best depth pieces in this tournament out of all the team that is coming out. So I really like NYCFC chance of moving on. The only reason why I'm not putting them above the Union is because there is still that uncertainty with the fact that they got off to a slow start under Ronnie Delia, and that I wonder now that Ronnie Delia has 3.5 months to think about what he did wrong in the first two games and how he, of course, adjusts. Would that kind of thing would come back to haunt NYCFC, where they got off to a bit of a slow start, and that if he does figure it out, then there is a chance that potentially he could get this team in first place. In fact, I would say that when the Union play against NYCFC, which I believe they do face each other head to head, I know in Group A each of these teams do not face two teams in the group stage because of the unbalanced kind of group numbers in Group A, but I'm assuming that the Union and NYCFC is going to face off against each other, and when they do face off against each other, I think the winner of that game is potentially going to top Group number A. Now, in third place, I'm going to say the host, Orlando City. So obviously, Orlando City, they get the big advantage of the fact that, they are the hosts of this tournament, and they know how to deal with the climate and the weather. Although you could argue with the fact that Orlando City have made so many changes this offseason, bringing some of these new guys into the team. Most of these guys probably have never dealt with the heat and the humidity that is the Florida summertime, and it's going to be, I don't really think that's going to play in their advantage. But at the same time, what will be advantage is Oscar Pereira, because he has a good track record in terms of doing well in tournament. He's also a guy that knows how to get a team to the playoffs. Just look at what happened with him and FC Dallas and how he's able to bring that young core into the playoffs and go deep into it. And I feel like Oscar Pereira is trying to do the same thing with Orlando City, knowing the fact that there are definitely a lot of youngsters on this team, and he's trying to kind of use the same formula that he did with FC Dallas and try to do it with Orlando City. And we shall see whether or not if it's going to be successful or not. But I just have a feeling something tells me it could be successful. I know in the first two games it didn't really quite work out very well, but again, as I said before, anytime when you have a new head coach that is coming into it, it's going to be tough in the first couple of games for these players to adapt to his tactics. And this is also the same thing I said about Ronnie Delia, where I think once that he knows his squad a little bit better, I think he's going to get the best out of the team. Now that Oscar Pereira has better time to know his squad and how to make this squad, how to get the best out of the squad and how to make this team competitive, I think Orlando City could have a good chance to finally make their first ever playoff appearance in their franchise history. And yes, I'm going to be with Orlando City fans and say that yes, this will count them in terms of making their first playoff appearance, even though I know some people will say, yeah, I don't think that counts because this tournament, it looked like it's going to be an absolute shit show, and it's not really a tournament where who is going to be the best team left standings, but more like who exactly is going to be the team that get less infective and that get very lucky that some of their player does not get tested positive for this virus. Now at number 4, and I'm actually going to put a star next to number 4 because anytime when I put a star, these are usually the teams that might have not finished in the automatic spot to move on into the round of 16, but they're like the best third place team, or in this case, the best fourth place team. And I'm going to go with the other Florida team, Inter Miami. Now, this is a bit risky, putting Inter Miami in this spot where they're going to be moving on into the next round, because there is still certainly a lot of uncertainty with this team, especially in the striker department, where it's going to be interesting to see who exactly is going to play that spot. I heard that Julian Carenza and Robbie Robinson looks like they recover from their injury during this pandemic, which is definitely great news for Inter Miami, because there was a lot of concern heading into this tournament, not knowing who exactly they can play as striker, because all their strikers unfortunately are on the IR. But it seemed like both of them are going to be available in this game, and I wonder which player that Diego Alonso is going to do. I'm assuming most likely he could play Carenza, because when they sign him, they think he could be the guy that leads the line. And the only reason why they play Robbie Robinson for the first two games was Carenza was injured, and they really don't have any option besides putting Robertson in that starting striker position. So it'll be interesting to see if that is going to be the case again. But it's also going to be interesting to see whether or not those two guys can actually provide goals, because we know for a fact that this team does have a decent midfield and defense, and it showed in the first two games where they really gave LAFC a lot of trouble and held them within just one goal. And anytime when you play against LAFC and only held them to one goal, which by the way, that only goal that they conceded was just a moment of magic from Carlos Vela, and that that one, there's really nothing they can do about it. That just shows you that this team does have a good defense, and they got unlucky against DC with that red card happening in the second half, and that if that red card didn't happen, I'm pretty sure that they could have got their first ever victory in their franchise history. But the attack and the goal scoring is gonna definitely be an issue with Inter Miami, and I'm banking the fact that it's going to work out, and that their strikers are going to score a couple of goals, and that Rodolfo Pizarro might be a guy that would really step up to not only be a goal scorer for this team, but also be a guy that be the creative player on this team, and that I think they're going to finish fourth. And let's also mention the fact that Diego Alonso, when he was with Rayados, he has a good record in terms of doing tournament play, and especially he was the manager that led Rayados to that CONCACAF Champions League just a couple of years back. Now, in fifth place, and these are the team that unfortunately will be missing out of the round of 16 spot, and that, of course, is the Chicago Fire. And, for the last couple of years, I always say that the Chicago Fire is probably one of the hardest teams to figure out, because this team does have talent, but it's just a matter if they actually show that talent and actually play to their potential. Because there's times where they could play to their potential and become look like one of the best team in the league, and then there's time where they look like an absolute dumpster fire and look like one of the worst teams in the league. So I have no idea which kind of Fire team is going to show up, and I know this offseason they definitely made a lot of signings, and obviously some people would say that they're kind of almost like an expansion team with the way that they just rebranded their logo, rebranded the color scheme, and getting a new manager and getting numerous new DP player. But here's the thing, I don't know if it's going to really work out, that there's a lot of unknown factor with the Chicago Fire team, and anytime when you mention unknown and the Chicago Fire in the same sentence, again, I can't figure out whether or not if they're going to be competitive now. Like, they could really surprise me in this tournament and do very well, but they can also prove me right, and the fact that they could potentially finish where they are right here, or even dead last in Group A, because none of their team really decided to show up in this tournament. And at number 6, and I know this is a bit of a tough one to put them in number 6, because I really want Nashville to do well, and I know Nashville has a good defense and midfield just like Inter Miami, but like Inter Miami, they don't have the goal scorer. And unlike Inter Miami, I think I actually trust Inter Miami in terms of their attacking option than Nashville does, because when you look at Nashville right now, they don't really have a goal scorer, and they don't even have a striker that can really score a bunch of goals. And that, unless if guys like Hani Mukhtar, Rendell Leao, and Danny Rios, or even Dominic Kobachi can step up in terms of scoring goals, where exactly is the goals going to score? Obviously, Walker Zimmerman is not going to score you guys every single game, and if he does that, then my God, that is probably one of the few times where we could actually see a top goal scorer on a team that comes from a center back. But other than that, I just think as long as they cannot score goals, you cannot get points, and you cannot get victory in the group. And because of that, I think that is probably the reason why Nashville could potentially finish bottom. But as I said, unless if those guys I mentioned on the attack can really step up and actually show that they can, of course, provide the goals for this team, then I just don't see how Nashville is potentially going to move on into the next round and might actually finish bottom in the group. Now, moving on into Group B, which originally I say this is probably the easiest group to predict because I kind of have a feeling who exactly is going to finish where. And also, this is the group where my team, the San Jose Earthquakes, is in. But now I'm going to say this is the uncertainty group because the uncertainty about this group is involved with one team. And as I mentioned earlier in this video, that team that unfortunately have 6 players that got tested positive once they arrived in this bubble in Orlando is FC Dallas. And, you know, it's not just 6 players that got tested positive. It's now actually 9 players. You count the player that actually got tested positive before they arrived in this bubble. And they're really the one team that I think a lot of people, and certainly a lot of officials that plan this tournament in MLS really worry about, and kind of is the worst case scenario where unfortunately one of these teams are going to have kind of a little bit of an outbreak within their team. And, you know, I know Luchi Gonzalez yesterday says that, you know, he's hoping that those players that got infected or tested positive for this COVID-19 will recover in time before the tournament start. But knowing the fact that those players got tested positive literally from a couple of days ago, and I think the protocol is you have to self-isolate yourself for 14 days. So, you know, most of those players, if they are going to undergo this protocol, well, they have to undergo this protocol, they won't be ready for the first game of this group stage, and that could really become a huge problem for Luchi Gonzalez. And that, you know, especially if those players that got infected by this virus and got tested positive are guys from his starting 11, that could really create nightmares in terms of what exactly is he going to do. I mean, I know FC Dallas does have some depth in their team, and that they do have some youngster that can step up from this team, but even then, you know, we don't know exactly if those players that are supposed to be depth pieces for this team also got infected by this virus. And it just gets to a point where there could be a case where I won't be surprised in these upcoming days or even today that FC Dallas decided to withdraw this tournament. I made FC Dallas situation a comparison to the Orlando Pride when they decided to withdraw from the NWSL, because they also have the same amount of players that got infected by this virus. The Orlando Pride, they had 6 players that got tested positive for this, and the same goes with FC Dallas and 3 other players that got tested positive before they arrived this. So with that being said, I'm actually just going to put FC Dallas in this Group B first, and I'm going to put them in 4th place. And it's not because I don't believe the fact that Dallas could be a team that had no chance in terms of moving into the next round, but knowing what's going on right now with this team, and that there's uncertainty of whether or not if they're going to be participating in this tournament or not, and that there is uncertainty of which player actually got the virus and how much that will really hurt Dallas' chances heading into this tournament, I just cannot put them anywhere but 4th place right now. Like, unless if Dallas, those players that got tested positive are not really players that usually are in this starting 11, which I think that's the best case scenario, then I can really see this team to potentially challenge for the top 2 spot in this group and move on to the next round. But because of this whole uncertainty, I'm sorry, I just had to put them in 4th place, and I just don't see how they are going to recover from this and potentially moving on into the next round, or even going to be in this tournament in the first place. But talk about 1st place in Group B, I'm just going to put the Seattle Sounders in 1st place. So I basically just went from top, or not really top to bottom, but more like bottom to top. And this one is not a big surprise. I mean, you know, if there's any teams that probably will be very happy after the group draw was conducted, it's got to be the Seattle Sounders. I mean, they have probably one of the most talented squad in this tournament, and maybe now the most talented squad in this tournament, knowing what's going on with LAFC and that potentially Carlos Vela is going to be opted out of this tournament. Looks like the Sounders might have the best squad and might be the team to beat heading into this tournament. So I think they're going to finish 1st in this tournament. And coming into 2nd place, I'm going to say it's my team, the San Jose Earthquakes, that's going to finish 2nd. Almeida, obviously, he knows how to do well in tournament. And, you know, this man-marking style of play, I know there's going to be a lot of question of how it's going to work out in this tournament, and whether if it actually is going to be successful, knowing the fact that this team is going to play in a very hot and humid kind of environment, and when you play in that environment, you cannot have such a high intensity like what the man marking system that Almeida is going to do. But I do trust the fact that Almeida does make some adjustment, or maybe he'll just abandon the man marking system and just go with what everybody usually likes to play. But other than that, I do trust the fact that Almeida would find a way to get the best out of this team, and this team, of course, will be moving on into the next round. Although they are going to be fighting another team that is going to be moving on, that could potentially move on into the next round, besides FC Dallas, that of course. And that, of course, is the Vancouver Whitecaps. And Vancouver, it's easy for people to write them off. And also, I just realized I should have put red on Group B, because I put red color for this group. Oh well, whatever. A lot of people can easily write off the Vancouver Whitecaps and say that they're probably not going to get any chance. Well, I don't think so. I really think that this team can really be a team that people shouldn't take very lightly. And in some way, I probably should have mentioned them in the honorable mention in terms of who I think could be the dark horse heading into this, because I think this team have definitely improved with the way that they play in the first 2 games this season. And now they, of course, have Lucas Cavallini, who I think he is going to be a player that is going to be not only be the goal scorer of this team, but he's going to be the MVP of this team. And that if he can, of course, get going, this Whitecaps team can be a very, very dangerous team and can really challenge the Quakes for that second spot. Like, I think when the Quakes play against the Whitecaps and Dallas potentially, those are going to be a must-win game for the Quakes. Like, if they do not get points against those teams, and maybe not even get 3 points to at least one of those teams, then I have a feeling the Quakes are not going to move on into the next round, because I know for a fact that when the Quakes play against the Sounders, barring if the Quakes can look as competitive like in last season when they play against the Sounders, I just don't see them actually beating them, and that I think it's really the only way I can see the Quakes could potentially move on into the next round is that they can get points against the Whitecaps and Dallas. And if they can't do that, and if the Whitecaps can get points against the Quakes or FC Dallas, and vice versa, the same can go with FC Dallas getting points against the Caps and the Quakes, then that would really be the decider of who exactly is moving on into the next round. Now we're going to be heading into Group C. And I call this the underrated group because there are a lot of teams that are very, very underrated and not really talked a lot about. But in first place, I am, of course, going to pick Toronto FC as the team that is going to finish top. And this one is not a big surprise. Like, I think they're probably the best team in this group, and a lot of people would definitely pick them. And kind of you'll be kind of foolish to not put TFC in terms of this top spot. However, I will say this, if they want to finish top of this group, they're going to have to potentially get a win against Montreal, because I think that Canadian Classique can really decide whether or not if Montreal could potentially find their way in the top 2 spot or even finish top in this group, and whether if TFC can do the same thing. I'm going to say that they, of course, do win that Canadian Classic, and they eventually will finish first in this group. Now, in second place, I'm actually going to go with the New England Revolution. And again, Bruce Arena, as I mentioned before, he is a guy that has done it for club and country in terms of having success in tournament, and I have a feeling he's going to do the same thing with the refs. I really like the attacking option with Buxa, Bo, and Pinea up there. The midfield is going to be a little bit issue because I heard Caicedo is not going to be available in this tournament, and that does leave a little bit of a hole in terms of that midfield. The defense itself, that's still also could be a little bit of a question, but I think with their attacking power that they had, and again, knowing Bruce Arena knows how to get his team to move on into the next round of the group stage match, I think New England is going to be the team that is moving on into the next round. And keep in mind, they have also been one of the most unluckiest team in the beginning of the season. Like, the first 2 games that they had, they could have easily got 4 points in the first 2 games. And people forgot in that Montreal game, yes, I know the Impact, of course, won that game, but just 90 seconds before the Impact scored that winning goal to eventually win it 2-1, New England, of course, actually scored a goal that looked like it was going to be a winning goal for them, but then it, of course, was unfortunately disallowed by VAR. So they are very unlucky in the way that they weren't able to get more than just 4 points that they have this season, but we shall see whether or not they can be a little bit more lucky, and that luck would turn around for them heading into this tournament. And in third place, as I mentioned, I'm going to put Montreal in third place. But I'm going to say they're one of the best third place team because, again, knowing the Impact has a good history of tournament play, I really cannot forget to put the Impact to move on into the next round. And as long as if the Impact can do what they did in the first 2 games, which is play good defense and kind of grind out resort, I think they could be a team that could potentially move on into the next round. But of course, if their defense cannot hold up, and also if their attacking pieces like Bojan, for example, cannot score the goals for them, then I think I might think about not putting this star next to them, and that they probably would be knocked out they will be knocked out of this group stage. So we'll see whether or not if that is going to be the case. But now in number 4, and the last team I'm going to predict in this video is going to be DC United. And again, DC, I can definitely see them finish in the top 2 spot if that attack, of course, can get going. Like the first 2 games has been a huge disappointment for DC United, knowing the fact that they spent so much money to try to improve their attack, and they made some very big signing that I thought for sure that this can really propel this DC team to the next level. And then the first 2 games happened, and they look absolutely awful in the first 2 games. Like, they got outplayed by the Rapids in that game, and they got very lucky against Inter Miami in that game, and that if it wasn't for that red card, I'm positively sure that DC wouldn't have not got all 3 points in that game. So, unless that attack can get going, and that that defense that has looked very shaky in the first 2 games, even though I thought that defense was probably the biggest strong point of this team, unless if things are not going to turn around, they're going to finish fourth place, as I'm going to be predicting them in Group C. But there you have it. That is pretty much it for my prediction of part 1 of this MLSisback tournament. And as always, let me know in the comments below, what do you think of these teams that I put, and have I got any of these teams wrong in terms of the prediction? And at the end of the day, I think once this tournament is over, and if this tournament is going to be played, I won't be surprised I'm going to get some of these predictions wrong, because there's a lot of uncertainty about this tournament, and that there's a lot of uncertainty of how each team is going to play, and that since there's only 3 games that is going to be happening in the group stage, if you are a team that come out of the group stage and you started slow and you weren't able to get a win in your first game and didn't get anything out of the first game, then there is definitely a tall mountain to climb for you to move on into the next round. And I can definitely assure you that if you lose 2 games in the group stage, you are pretty much on the ropes of potentially getting knocked out in the knockout stage. So yeah, there's the unpredictability in terms of that, and there's also, not to mention, the unpredictability of what's going to happen with some of these players, and that unfortunately, if your player could either get injured during this tournament or get tested positive for COVID-19, that could really be another big factor that could either derail could either derail a team's chances of potentially moving on into the next round. But that being said, let me know in the comments below, what do you think of this video, and that on Monday, barring any announcement of, or barring there's no announcement that this tournament is going to be canceled or pushed back, I of course will do part 2 of this video. But until then, hope you guys enjoy this video, and I will see you guys next time.